before we talk about Arsenal's game, Gal, I did want to say sorry to you on behalf, not for me personally, but on behalf of the football terrorists. I think that you deserve an outright apology for all the stick and banter you've received over the last few years for claiming that there was an agenda against Arsenal when it came to refereeing. Because in the independent hearing and the documents that have been released, the FA made a genuine argument. And for me, this was a disgrace this week, a genuine argument that they felt that although they essentially know that Arteta didn't break any rules with what he said, they believe he individually should be punished because of the profile he has. So if other managers say what he did, they wouldn't care. But because he's Arteta, he must be punished. Now, for me, that is the definition of an agenda, complete bias officiating, and shows, and I don't think it's solely about Arsenal. It just shows that big clubs will definitely be treated differently from smaller clubs. The FA have admitted it. So it does look, Gal, like you've been wrong. Right, sorry, all along.
Terry, I'm not even going to take a victory lap for this because we already know this. Let's be honest. Arsenal, we've seen numerous games go back all the way to Pepe's handball against Burnley, numerous situations where referees make mistakes. But you know what? The referees have always been bad. What my issue is, if you can't hold them accountable. You cannot question them. You cannot speak about referees. And I don't think it's healthy to have an environment where people are avoid of any criticism. We should be able to criticize them, and managers, players should be allowed to criticize them without it going into absolute carnage like it did in Turkey. You can have a situation where you can say, you know what, I thought this and this was should have gone this way. The referee, I think you might have got it wrong there. Or you should be able to say, you know what, this decision didn't go our way, but I think on another day, maybe the referee would have called it the other way, and I think that was the wrong decision. But guess what? If you do that in today's football, you get banned, you get punished, you get suspended. What Mikel Arteta did and what he said after that Newcastle game, I think was fully deserved. And I don't think he should have got any suspension. And after the subsequent body came out and said all these things, you can clearly see that they wanted to make an example out of him. And they wanted to judge basically Klopp, Arteta, whenever they make a similar comment, they're going to get treated more harshly than the De Zerbis of the world because of how big of a profile our clubs are. And that's a clear agenda. It just goes to show you that we are the high profile games. These referees, sometimes they're going to be hard. They're going to be wrong and strong. And I don't like that. And I just think every time we call out referee decisions, I think these managers and these players should be allowed to do so also, as long as it doesn't lead to absolute carnage like it did in Turkey.
I agree that you should be allowed to criticize referees in a professional manner, but I don't think the way that Arteta went about it was necessarily professional, right? This is never a goal. This is never a goal, right? The league is a disgrace, right? Like, you're not the best league in the world. Those aren't criticisms. Those are slanderous statements because it was a goal.
I think you need to
Will, have you read the independent panel's review of this? Their language very clearly states that there's nothing, the FA have admitted to it, there's nothing that he said that actually broke the rules. So
right, but there's a difference between the actual letter of the law to the spirit of the law, right? He may not have broken any letter of the law, so he shouldn't be punished. If he hasn't broken the letter, he can't be punished. The reason why they wanted him to be punished is because he's broken the spirit of the law, right? So, which is the spirit of the law is to not, slander or say things that can necessarily be. I don't think he should be punished because he hasn't broken the letter, right? But the reason they wanted him to be punished isn't because they hate Arsenal or they hate Mikel Arteta. It's because they felt that he's violated the spirit of the law.
So, and where does it stop, Terry? Where does it stop?
But that's not. So I just want to say, but that's negated by the fact that what their argument is that Arteta was more worthy of punishment than other managers due to his high-profile status. So I get what you're saying, but you can't turn around and say Mikel Arteta can't say that because he's Arsenal manager, but Big And can say it because Spurs have a smaller following.
No, I agree. That's wrong.
That wrecks and that's my point here. That wrecks the integrity of the game. And when you look at their actual claims against him, this is what they claimed. Essentially, his comments might damage the wider interests of football,
which they
might damage the image of the game, and in some ways bring the game into disrepute. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, this is the example I would give. Who lives in London here? Nathan. Okay, Nathan. So what Nathan does, and London as a whole has got And it's going crazy for muggings and street robberies. It's like no one's ever seen it before. The police and the local government are doing nothing about it. It's getting worse. And then Nathan's part of a group trying to fix this. And he goes on TV and he says, this is happening on a daily basis. It's increasing. We're getting no support and help. And it's a disgrace. And we need to be protected more. And then the police knock on his door and arrest him. And the judge puts him in prison for bringing the country into disrepute because it might stop tourists coming to London because he's highlighted the problems. That is how I read this. They basically said, look, Mikel Arteta and Arsenal with their letters, Jurgen Klopp as well, by the way, because a lot of ex-refs have gone for him and Arteta saying they're responsible.
Walton, what a disgrace he is.
They're responsible for a referee being punched in Turkey. Like that player woke up and went, oh, Klopp said it's okay to punch him. Victimhood out of control. The idea is they're trying to punish Mikel Arteta for rightfully calling out their nonsense. And I understand there may be a better and more professional way of saying it, but at the same time, they didn't mention that in any of their reports. That wasn't in their arguments. And the reason that I stand by Arsenal and Arteta on this, the reason I stand by Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool on this, is it could be your team next. It could be your club next. It's slippery slope nonsense. And if we as football fans defend the referees here, defend the FA here, you are opening up a can of worms and you're setting a precedent that one day could damage you. And everyone needs to stand up for this. You should be able to call out this nonsense.
But shouldn't there be a balance?
By the way, I just want to say one more thing. Will, they actually determined that what Mikel Arteta said was not an insult to the match officials on the game. It was more to the whole system, as Terry said. So he never actually,
and that's why he didn't get.
He never
punished.
Actually acted in an unprofessional manner.
No.
Because he wasn't directing it. He wasn't directing it at an individual. You can criticize a system, but when you're criticizing an individual personally, then you're making it personal and unprofessional.
Right, and that's why he didn't get punished, because he didn't mention a direct individual's name, right? Even though he inferred it, he never mentioned it. So that's why he didn't get punished.
1 second.
That's the letter of the law.
By the way, also, the Premier League themselves have, in the document, stated that they have similar concerns of same things that Mikel Arteta brought up in his statements. So it is already there. It's blatant to see.
Isn't this a wider issue, though? Isn't this a wider issue? Because I understand maybe on this occasion, Arteta was picked on unfairly. But how many occasions are there where the managers come out after a game and they berate the referee and they almost apply pressure in get press conferences before the game or after the game so that the next one goes in their favor? Referees are under a microscope like crazy.
I have a simple solution, but I think you guys are not going to like it because a lot of people don't like to change the game. But my solution is actually add challenges so the teams and they can challenge you during the game. Because now,
let them ref. Let them ref and stop moaning after every single decision.
The VAR system currently seems to be just get on with the game as quick as possible. We need to keep it moving as quick as possible.
But what is that? Even if in the game, like Arsenal fans,
let me give you an example. 1 second. Let me land, bro. Let me land, and then you'll get my point. My main point is, at this moment in time, we've seen the VR decisions coming out. They seem to be moving so quickly that they just want to get on with the game. And they don't actually seem like they're trying to get the correct decision and determine the exact correct decision. So a challenge would allow the team, the player, and the manager to get the correct decision on the day because they'll challenge them directly.
Where that doesn't work, unless you fix the people doing it, is you could challenge the Newcastle goal and they still give you the decision that you didn't like. So that doesn't fix anything for me. It's about changing who governs it and having independent reviews. That's the only way you're going to make this better, because as we've said before, you can't disallow the goal. Let the goal against Arsenal stand, and in the first game returning after that international break, allow the smallest little nudge on Alisson, and then disallow the goal. That is the inconsistencies. You can't, and rightfully should call out the fact that Crystal Palace got a penalty against Liverpool. 3 hours later, an identical foul on Jesus was not given. That is what needs to be called out and where the consistency needs to be. And I understand the way maybe Mikel Arteta come across could be seen as problematic. And if he didn't hire, and by the way, he had to hire a very expensive criminal lawyer to get him off of an FA charge, he would have been punished. The FA would have punished him if they were able to, and if they didn't go out of their way, Arsenal, to make sure they supported their manager and bring in a top quality lawyer.
For that reason,
for me, it's the fact they made an argument that it's okay for other managers to say it, but not Mikel Arteta, should worry all fans of big clubs. And I know that there's stick, Spurs with Arsenal, and they want to see Arsenal in the mud, and they get it. But this is bigger than our club rivalries and and the banter we have with one another. Because for years I've felt this has gone on. And I do agree with you, Alex, that managers and people will try to influence referees to give the decisions in their favor. So it can definitely work both ways. But at the same time, VAR should have stopped all of that.
But you know what, Terry?
It's nonsense. The VAR. We don't want them to re-referee the games. Yes, we fucking do. We want the right decision.
It doesn't help getting.
No one complains, and if the consistent decision happened, whether you like the law or not, nobody complains. Most of the complaints we have, I've seen 5 penalties given for that in the last 2 weeks. Now my team gets it, and we weren't awarded a penalty. That shouldn't happen with VAR. If we as fans remember all these incidents, how can the professionals that are paid very well that are running it not remember them? It, for me, is just catastrophically bad. And it happens to all clubs. But for me, the way they've been targeting Arteta, the fact he got booked for celebrating the other day, fuck me.
That was pathetic.
Then Chris Wilder runs down the touchline when his team scores and doesn't get booked. Those things have to be called out by football fans.
Can I just say something, Terry?
We call that out.
It happens with players too, it happens with players too, not just managers, right? For example, you take the Romero tackle in the last game, right? You yourself, you said you didn't think it was a red, right? Gallagher came out afterwards and said it wasn't a red, right? And everybody else said it was a red. But they're going to give Romero a yellow card faster than they will anyone else because he has that reputation, right? And now that Arteta's created that perception, he's going to get yellow cards faster than a manager who doesn't.
Can I rebut that though? Because I'll give you an example. They created this rule anyways about the management touchline based on Arteta and his behavior and how much he was highlighted in the media last season. His antics on the touchline is what created this whole,
right, that's what I'm saying.
But then you have a club chest bumping a goalkeeper in the middle of the game.
For 2-3 seasons,
he should be given a card too. But what I'm saying is the game.
No, what I'm trying to say to you is right, for 2 or 3 seasons when Klopp did it, right, it wasn't really an issue. It was they never changed the rules. However, last season after Arteta's antics, as they like to put it, it was then implemented as okay. Now there's rules on the touchline of what a manager and his staff can do, and there's been bookings and etc. Right, and everything. The biggest issue for me in general is there's this whole thing where the FA are trying to silence managers of what you can police and what you can and can't say, right? And
yeah, because you can't let them say too much, though. Like as an organization,
hold on. But that takes what is at football. As a fan, I want to hear my manager.
You shouldn't be able to intimidate the officials,
right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
What do you mean intimidate the officials?
I'll give you an example.
I've never seen a manager come out and say, if we don't get a penalty next game, I'm going to fucking knock you out, bruv.
Yeah.
That's intimidation.
I'm not talking about intimidation, physical intimidation.
How do you expect them to change?
Sorry. Well, what are they intimidating them with? What is the threat?
They can't be perfect. They can't be perfect. If they were perfect.
Hang on, stop. That isn't the question. How are they intimidating them? What is the threat behind the intimidation?
I'll tell you. So, for example, they're not doing it now because the rule exists that they're not allowed to speak out, right? If that rule didn't exist and they were allowed to just do whatever, you have managers that have high profiles that are famous, for example, Jose Mourinho or Pep, and they could literally berate an individual referee every single time that they come into a consistency, and that referee could come under so much heat and pressure that he starts to call things in their favor in order to avoid that pressure. That's why the rule exists.
Anthony Taylor with Chelsea is a perfect example of it. We literally nitpick before the game. The minute he's announced as a Chelsea ref, my fan base has got a whole agenda, excuse written. We can't win this game. He's reffing. So all of a sudden, he's human, right? We need to remember there's a human aspect of it. In his head, he's either going to make decisions for Chelsea or he's going to say, you know what, screw him. They're going to abuse me anyway.
One second.
So I'm going to go the other direction.
There wouldn't be that issue.
I need to say something. Right? Do you guys not realize that a referee had to be basically sacked last year because he made a mistake that cost us 2 points? They gave a goal that didn't count. Also, Mikel Arteta was upset about the situation that happened between Tottenham and Liverpool, and he said these things shouldn't be happening after that goal was disallowed in that game. Then it happens to us, rightfully so. He can call out that these things continuously happen. Then he even went as far back to look at incidents before then to speak about some of these incidents that have been happening at our club. Personally, for me, I think, and I feel like at times as an Arsenal fan that I look at some of these games and these refereeing decisions, and they continuously make these mistakes. They
But we
deserve
all
to be
do. We
criticized.
lost the Champions League
They need
final
to be
due to a
called
bogus
out.
call.
They need to be called out. And if they're not being held accountable by us as fans, the managers, and the clubs, they will continuously get away with being absolutely terrible.
Tribalism is holding us back.
Let me, sorry, I want to say, Nathan, like, again, I understand influence, and I think what you were suggesting with Joe said he was trying to influence the referee. I don't call that intimidation. Intimidation for me is either physical or some type of other harm you're going to bring them, making them scared, making them terrified, being menacing. I don't think that's what Fergie and those guys did. Yes, they tried to influence the referees to give them decisions, but not in a way that made a referee fearful of losing his job or losing money or his family being attacked or anything like that. I think intimidation.
But that happened literally after the Europa League final.
Okay, that's one example. Again, but we're talking about one example. That for me. That to me is an example that proves the rule. That is an outlier. That isn't what majority of the time.
No, but that's what the rule is there to protect. That's my point.
No,
right?
Exactly.
Okay. But that's something that's happened once where Jose went after that guy, and it was Anthony Taylor, wasn't it?
Yeah, but if there was no rule, it would happen more often. That's my point.
The referees have been doing this since before the rule. The referees have been called out before the rule, and clearly they're being called out after the rule as well. I don't think the majority of the time when I've heard managers, in the years I've watched football talk about it, have been trying to intimidate and scare and be menacing.
It's not intimidation. What I mean by intimidation is not physical.
I didn't say physical, but
okay,
I don't. I think
there's more types of intimidation.
Intimidation implies you're trying to scare someone into doing something.
No.
I think you're trying to influence
intimidation
them.
Could be intellectual. It could be influential.
I understand what you're saying, but intimidation implies you're scaring someone into making a decision. Not you're turning around and you're influencing someone. Is where the word intimidation is not a night. No one wants to be told they're intimidating. Everybody would like to be told they're influencing and they're influential. There's differences. You're making it sound like these managers are out here trying to bully referees, and I don't believe that to be the case. I think they're
not trying to now because they'll get in trouble. Well, I'm saying, you're misunderstanding my point. I'm not saying they're bullying people now. They can't because the rule prevents them from doing so.
What rule?
I'm saying the rule of not being able to speak out about referees after the match, right? That rule existing in the FA.
You cannot question their competence.
Right. It's because you've never been able from bullying.
I've seen Fergie was banned for calling out referees before. You've always been banned for doing it. It's not they might have readjusted a rule, but you've always been in trouble if you said too much about a referee. However, you should be able to call out these poor. And one thing you said earlier that's really interesting. I'm very passionate about this because VAR was meant to fix it. Yes, they're human, and in real time on the pitch, you're going to make mistakes. No issue with that. It's what VAR is here to fucking stop. With replays and super slow-mos, when it's a blatant penalty that you've given to everybody else, there is no reason not to give it.
I agree.
But Terry, can I ask you a question? I agree with you. But you know, when we're watching live, we've heard Jermaine Genius or whoever's on the co-commentary. How many times? Oh, how long is this taking? This is blatant and obvious.
This is what I hate.
Because when they do make a mistake because they're rushing, people cook them. So they're going to take their time to make sure they get the right decision.
I agree with that. I agree with that, which is why I don't change my stance. I don't care how long it takes. I want the right decisions.
That for me is more, but you're asking for consistency as well. And consistency is not possible with multiple individuals because they're different. They have their own subjective opinion of how the rules
No. Subjectivity becomes objectivity with enough data, as you know. So, for instance, if you give penalties every time, like 9 times out of 10, when a player gets caught like Jesus was, that amount of data of they're all penalties changes it from being a subjective decision at large.
That has to be directed by the above organization to say that every single time this scenario happens, it must be given as a penalty.
I was going to get to that. Yeah. That's the whole point. It needs to be run better. It needs to be run better. Competent people running it to ensure these decisions are not being missed. I don't care what the commentator says.
Right, but what I'm saying is you're going to get into an infinite.
I'm not finished. Like I'm not worried about what Jermaine Genius says. It's about them understanding consistency. We as fans see the inconsistencies. Someone at PGMOL, at the FA, has to see it. And I understand they're never going to be perfect. And I don't think anybody's asking for complete, like, inhumane levels of perfection around this. But some of the inconsistencies are so blatant and obvious, it's crazy. And if football fans, if managers and clubs can't call it out, how is it going to be fixed? Whether they do it properly,
what I'm saying is they do. They do.
You know what's even more crazy? The Derby said he doesn't like English managers.
They do though. They have these meetings before the season starts, and they say, okay, this season, for example, the dissent yellow cards that they were just handing out like candy at the beginning of the season, right?
Yeah.
They had a meeting at the beginning of the season, said this is how we're going to implement and apply this rule, and they applied it consistently across the league. But there's going to be individual situations. If you did that for every single situation, you're going to have an infinite number of possibilities that could happen that you have to make a specific rule for at some point, unless AI is refereeing the game at some point, which then you bring it's completely objective at that point in time. That's going to be consistent regardless, right? Because it's a machine doing it, not a human. But each individual human has, when they read the laws, right? 12.3 or 12.1, what do they think reaches this threshold and how they apply it? You can't be consistent with humans unless it's the same human. One person can be consistent, 10 people can't.
I do think we can get, I understand you can't be 100% consistent, but then let's not be overly pedantic to that point. You can get much more consistency than we are seeing. The level of inconsistency is so vast, it's ridiculous in my opinion. So no one, again, let's not go to the nth degree and say, well, it's never going to be 100% perfect. Nobody expects that. But some of the decisions that we have seen have been crazy.